The views expressed on this special broadcast of the Take 12 radio show do not necessarily reflect those of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting or its affiliates. KHLT is not affiliated with any particular 12-step fellowship.
A very scary experience.
You know, God is a solution. God, the 12 step.
I like where he's going here.
Helps the community grow, helps us grow.
Monty has done a phenomenal job.
Lack of open-mindedness.
And you're talking about taking people through a spiritual process and getting them into recovery.
Thanks, Monty, and thanks for all your support.
We need spirituality to make this thing work long term.
It's an absolute pleasure. He certainly knows a lot of people.
This is one of the places that is about the business of the solution.
And now, broadcasting on location somewhere in the vast expanse of the Pacific Northwest, it's the over-opinionated 12-stepologist, the Monty'man.
That's right. Welcome to the show, my friends. You have tuned into Take 12 Recovery Radio here at Take12Radio.com on your internet dial. Welcome to the show. It is good to have you with us as always. Listen, you can listen to the show in a number of ways. You can listen on iTunes. You can go to our website at Take12Radio.com. Type in TAKE, the number 12, or the word 12, either way, radio.com. You can click to the listen live online button. You can click to the watch online button. That's our YouTube version, our audio version. You can follow us on Podomatic. You can download our app from Podomatic and become a Podomatic member. And there you can comment on the shows. You can like us on there. That helps us with our demographics. And as I said, iTunes. We also you can get the Podomatic app for Android if you are not an iPhone user. And you can download our show so you don't take up any of your data. You can sync it to your Bluetooth in your car, for crying out loud. Listen, there's really no reason not to tune in to Take 12 Radio. We're here for you 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And I have to tell you, I am just tickled to death to be coming into the year 2016 with my guest this week, the author of 8 books and producer of other successful films, Mr. Borchert. William Borchert is perhaps best known for the story of Bill W. My Name is Bill W. The story of the founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, starring James Woods, James Garner, and Jo Beth Williams. By the way, Bill also wrote the highly acclaimed movie When Love Is Not Enough, about the founding of Al-anon, starring Winona Ryder and Barry Pepper. He is the author and screenwriter of a number of different things. We're going to be talking about that. Bill has been on the show a number of times. We always love to feature him when he comes out with a new book. He's written a new book called How I Became My Father, a Drunk. And so we're gonna go to our first break instead of doing it later on in the show. We're going to do that right now. I want to get that out of the way so we can give as much time to Bill as we possibly can here, and we'll have one other break about midway during the show. Our email address is take12radio@comcast.net. So hold on to your recovery horses. You do not want to miss this interview with my guest, William Borchert, when we come back. When you hear that bell, you'll know it's time for Recovery 101. Recovery 101 with Bruce, Shelley, and Mark is a recovery broadcast based loosely on 12-step recovery programs. But it's less like a meeting and more like going to coffee afterwards. You know, the meeting after the meeting. Ooh. Your host used to suffer from insanity, but now they absolutely, unapologetically enjoy it.
That's right.
For incredible fun and informative recovery radio, tune in to Recovery 101 at recovery101.net on your internet dial. All right, and we have returned, and please check them out. There's just great folks down in Southern California broadcasting worldwide via the internet. Bill Wilson, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, was no saint to his own admission, but he realized that if he wanted to stay sober, he needed to talk to another alcoholic. What he decides to do in this sound clip from the movie My Name is Bill W., as depicted in this scene, is the reason AA exists today. Check this out.
Walter Tunks. Thank you, Reverend Tunks. Thank you. Yeah, 5 p.m. The gatehouse of the Cyberling estate. It's Mrs. Henrietta Cyberling. And the name of the man I'm going to meet again is Robert Smith? Dr. Robert Smith. Yes. No, yes, I have it all. Thank you again.
All right. That is James Woods playing the role of Bill Wilson in the movie My Name is Bill W. Really the most watched movie for television ever produced. And the gentleman who wrote this is my guest this week, William Borchert, but he's written other things as well. William, welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, Monty, good to talk to you again, Monty. How are you?
I'm doing well, and thank you so much for opening up our brand new year 2016 with our first guest interview of the year. It's an absolute pleasure, my friend.
Well, I consider it a privilege, Monty. Thank you very much for asking me again.
Absolutely. Now that scene where we just heard Bill, he's in a hotel lobby. Can you explain that a little bit to the listeners?
Well, Bill had gotten sober through a spiritual experience at Towns Hospital, and then he got an assignment from Wall Street to go to handle a proxy fight in Akron, Ohio. And the proxy fight, he lost it, so he was really down, and he was pacing the lobby and of the Mayflower Hotel, and suddenly realized that instead of picking up a drink, maybe he could talk to another alcoholic, and that way stay sober like he had done before. And that's when he reached out, and through a minister found another drunk in Akron, Ohio, who was actually a physician named Dr. Robert Holbrook Smith. And together they found they could stay sober. Dr. Smith said that Bill Wilson was the first one that ever understood what his problem was all about. And that's what gave birth to Alcoholics Anonymous. Two drunks who understood what their problems were all about. And then they had found a third guy, a lawyer, and before you knew it, Alcoholics Anonymous began to grow. It's just a marvelous, marvelous story.
Bill, it's so almost starts out like an iconic, joke. You had two drunks and a lawyer.
Yeah, right. Yeah, usually two drunks don't need a lawyer.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
And I use the word iconic, but I mean, it has to be humbling for you to be one of the names associated so strongly with probably the most watched television program ever in existence. I mean, this is an iconic TV program. I mean, I just
found, I only found that out a few months ago, Monty.
Yeah.
Through friends of mine at ABC and that first aired the show and at Hallmark Hall of Fame. They told me that this is the most watched television movie ever made. And it blew me away. But then as I began to think about it, when God makes a movie, it has to become the most watched movie
there
ever made.
You go.
Because God made this movie, I was just a companion along for the ride.
Yeah.
And I'm not being overly modest or anything else. That's what happens, when you turn your will and your life over to the care of a higher power.
Yep.
And let him run the show. He does a hell of a job.
Well, yeah, and the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous says, he's the father, he's the director, we're his children, we're his agents, and we're to be about the business of serving God and our fellows. And I just want to thank you for being obedient to that call.
Well, it really is as simple as that. And I'm not a holy roller. I'm not an overly religious or spiritual guy. I just understand, since I've gotten sober, what the truth is.
Yeah.
You know?
There you go.
And, I stumbled across the truth in sobriety. It was a very unfamiliar thing at that point because I hadn't paid much attention to it while I was drinking, you know.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah, and that, by the way, as you know, and as I think you've intimated that I've written other movies, and what I do these days is basically most of what I do anyway is dedicated to carrying the message of recovery, which the world desperately needs. And,
yes.
And that's why most of the books that I write and movies that I write these days have something to do with recovery.
And you've had your hands in screenwriting other films. I mean, you're no stranger to Al Pacino. You're no stranger to Raquel Welch.
I didn't write those. I was a partner.
Right.
I had 3 partners at that point in a company in New York called Artists Entertainment Complex, which was it's an independent motion picture production company, and we got together, and an investment banker took us public, so we had a lot of money. And we made movies. That's how I got involved. I had been writing corporate movies, but now I had a chance to really get involved in big motion pictures, and we made some really nice ones, as you said. We produced Serpico with Al Pacino and Dog Day Afternoon with Al Pacino, and we did a movie called Kansas City Bomber with Raquel Welch. And as I like to say, watching Raquel Welch back in those days, skating around a roller rink in black, tight-fitting leather pants was like having a spiritual experience in itself.
Yes,
it was great. So yeah, I've been really blessed. God has been. But then when I came to realize that why I've been blessed, I came to realize I had an obligation. I had a debt to repay. I mean, you can't be given this kind of a gift, of sobriety with all the wonderful things that comes with it, and not feel guilty for not paying back. So I had the opportunity to meet Bill Wilson and an opportunity to get to know, through my wife, Lois Wilson, really well. Lois and my wife and I were close friends for 15 years before she passed away. And that's what got me started, writing about recovery.
Right. And later we're going to hear a sound clip from the movie When Love Is Not Enough, the Lois Wilson story, when we come back from our break. But before we get into all that, I want the listeners, and I'm going to refer to this several times during the show, you could go to William's website at williamborchert.com, WILLIAMBORCHERT.com. You can follow the links here at take12radio.com as well. If you'd like his book, you can go directly to Amazon.com. The book is How I Became My Father a Drunk. Now, Bill, you've written other books. What made you decide to take this one on?
This was my 8th book, and I'm working on another one right now, as a matter of fact. What decided me to take it on is I was speaking at a big convention down in Florida, and for some reason or other, I noticed there was a lot of people in the audience that had my color hair, which is kind of tinged with gray these days. And so I started talking about my dad and what a rough relationship we had, because he was a terrible alcoholic.
Uh-huh.
And I came to hate him, and I swore I'd never be anything like him. And then when I found alcohol, I not only became like him, I became worse. But then I found sobriety, he found sobriety, and we became the closest friends you'd ever want. I mean, I just fell in love with him. I respected him. He became a very spiritual person. He and my mother fell in love again, and it was just healed the whole family, both his family and mine. And that's what happens in recovery. The families get healed. And so the chairman of that convention asked me if I ever thought about writing a book about that subject. And I said, why would I want to go through all that pain again?
Right, sure.
I don't like pain and discomfort. He said, because it could help a lot of people. And that rang a bell, because that's what I'm for. And that's what we're all for, to help other people. And so he said, think about it. So I thought about it, and I talked to my sister, I talked to my brother, and they agreed to, also dig up some old memories and whatnot. And so, and then I found a cigar box that my mom had given me 2 days after my father died, and it was filled with my father's thoughts about recovery, his thoughts about life, his thoughts about, the things that he had done wrong and it was able to correct it. And it was God handing me a gift, And so I had all that material and it's amazing what you can remember, when you start thinking about it. You dust off the old memory lines and it all comes back. And so I sat down and I wrote this book, and it's called How I Became My Father, a Drunk. And it came out in November. It was published in November, and it's getting some really nice reviews. And I'm getting calls and emails from people who I really identify with it, about
Sure.
relationships with their parents, because families really get sick when the alcoholic, drug addict, they bring the disease into the family, and it tears families apart. And that's another reason why I wanted to write it, to show families that there is a way out. There's a way out. There's a way to, not only a way out, but a way to a wonderful new way of life, far beyond our wildest dreams. I mean, my life has become incredible, and my father's and mother's was too. And because, God's gift is incredible.
It is.
And he gives us this gift for a very simple reason, so that we can help others who are in trouble. That's it.
That's it. That's it. You bet.
Yeah.
Now, you say something that some of the listeners, might be scratching their heads about. We have a lot of different people that listen to this show. We've got people in recovery, people that maybe they should be, and
right.
and certainly we have lots of family members of that tune in. One of the things that you say here that is the most baffling part of the disease of alcoholism is, you say, and I quote, "It seemed like no matter where I went or who I was with, I was surrounded by the diabolical effects of drinking. So why would I ever want to pick up a drink myself when I got older?" And that is
right.
now, you and I know the answer to that, but a lot of people don't. So why, Bill?
It's very simple. Alcoholism and drug addiction, it's a disease. It's an addictive disease. And, because the body of an alcoholic and a drug addict is different than the body of another person.
Yeah.
Just like some people get cancer, others don't. Some people get diabetes, others don't. Some people get heart disease, others don't. And some people get alcoholism and others don't. But when you get it, you become powerless, because it's a threefold disease. It's not just physical. It's mental and spiritual. So an alcoholic walks around constantly thinking about having a drink. He's got a mental obsession. I had a mental obsession,
Stone cold sober, right? Stone cold sober.
Yeah. I thought drinking was a friend of mine. It made me feel better.
Sure.
I thought it made me a better writer, a better newspaper reporter, a better lover, a better everything, And that's why it's so cunning, baffling, and powerful, because it allows you to think that way as it draws you into its claws, And then once it's got you, it does hell. It pays. You got to pay the price, man. It's like when you go into a bar and sit down. It's like the bar is filled with crazy glue. You can't get your ass off the stool even though you want to. I go to Monty'man Saloon just for a couple of drinks, and then I wanted to go home and have dinner with my family, and I couldn't get my fanny off the stool. I couldn't understand why. Now, non-alcoholics find it difficult to understand that. Well, I find that my wife has diabetes, and I find it difficult to understand her disease too.
Sure.
But that's the way it is, and it's difficult to accept the fact that alcoholism is a disease, because what it does to the alcoholic physically and mentally. We act crazy, we do crazy stuff, and it's just all part. We do anything to have another drink, to get another drink, to get the price of another drink or another drug,
Yeah. Yeah.
I keep mentioning drugs now because today, in this day and age, more people, become dual addicted.
Sure.
Young people in particular, they get on these pharmaceuticals and they get addicted to pharmaceuticals, and the next thing you know, they're hooked on drugs and alcohol. So that most of the people today are what I call dual addicted, not just to alcohol or to drugs, but to both. you know.
Right. Oh, absolutely. Now, you made reference to the obsession of the mind, and that can happen. Listeners, for those of you who don't know, the obsession of the mind can happen when you're stone cold sober, and you're thinking things like, this time it'll be different. I'll be able to drink like a gentleman. Maybe I'll just control my drinking. And, of course, the show never goes off very well. But you make mention of the obsession of your father's drinking, even when your mother was sick, and you watched him struggle with the obsession. So how old were you when you started realizing your dad was having such an issue?
Well, I didn't understand what was going on when I was a kid. I didn't understand that at all, and that's why I came to hate him. I mean, I kept saying, "How can anybody do this?" As I say in the book, my mother almost died of appendicitis. It broke in her, and she got that poison in the system, and she almost died. And yet he's out there drinking.
Yeah.
He's not taking care of it. He wasn't home when it happened, so he couldn't take her to the hospital. But he was out there drinking, and I couldn't. I loved my mother, and I couldn't understand why he would do this to my mother. Neither could my sister and brother, and because you just can't understand why someone would do things to somebody that they allegedly love,
Yeah.
Terrible things, And of course, I never had a father growing up. When, the other fathers were playing ball with their kids, my father was falling out of drunken taxi cabs on the street in front of me when I was playing stickball,
Sure.
And the embarrassment and the shame, but I didn't understand. I couldn't understand. And by the way, it was not just my father, it's throughout my whole family. My whole family was riddled with alcoholism,
Yeah.
And even when I started drinking myself, I knew I could handle it. I could control it, I thought, and I was going to show my father how to be a better drinker. And the insanity of this disease is incredible. It's incredible.
Yeah, and people, alcoholics will try. I mean, people out there that don't understand, they think, well, we'll just pray that some cataclysmic thing will happen and that'll change them. You make mention of something that was quite powerful that happened when the attack on Pearl Harbor took place. Your dad actually cut back on his drinking, but that didn't stop it either.
No, and he wanted to join the army.
Yeah.
And he was very mad at the army that they wouldn't draft him. But back then, if you had more than 3 kids, they wouldn't draft you. And that was an excuse for him to keep drinking, because he was now mad at the army and because he wanted to kill all the Germans and all the Japs and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And my mother realized that he just wanted to join the army so he could now be free to drink without anybody interfering with him. Yeah, that's what it was really all about. And,
sure.
But what's amazing? What is amazing, though, and we can talk about this a little bit more, but, as I say, I became an alcoholic, too, and wound up like my father, blowing every opportunity that was given me. I had a great career in the media. When I was 19, I was a newspaper reporter and writer for the largest Indian newspaper in the world, the New York Journal American in New York, and I had bylines and traveling around the country and covering major stories, the biggest stories at the time, and then I went from there to writing for magazines, writing radio shows. I had great opportunities, but the more I drank, the more trouble I got in, and I wound up drinking my way out of the business and winding up sleeping in 3-bag hotels. And then when I got sober, life began to change, and whoever knew I would wind up a low-down drunk who wanted to kill himself by throwing himself down an air shaft, winds up, writing a movie, about it's close to the program that saved my life, and it's incredible, and
absolutely phenomenal.
And even at my age, and I just passed 49, as you know, my life gets better every day, because sobriety is an incredible gift. And anybody can have it. Anybody can have it. It's freely given by the higher power, and all we got to do is want it and then take care of it. Right, Monty?
Yep, that's it. And sometimes it seems so simplistic that some people get scared and they don't take it. There's a gentleman that I started sponsoring here a few weeks ago. and he went in for back surgery. He didn't call me. I didn't even know he was going in for it. He got scared and went out and decided that he was going to have a little bit of indulge in some substances before his back surgery, and he didn't come out of his back surgery alive. He passed away the other day.
Oh, God. Oh, wow.
And we watch this stuff happen, and we see these things happen when it just doesn't have to be that way, does it?
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
But it is such, as I said, a baffling and powerful disease.
Yes.
And it affects us mentally to the point where we don't think there's a way out.
And this guy wasn't a bad guy. He wasn't evil. He wasn't this horrible individual. He was just very sick. Yeah.
Yeah. The sad part about it, Monty, is it's not just that it affects the individual,
right?
Like you and I, or my dad. It affects all those around us. Every alcoholic affects at least 6 or 7 other people. Okay?
Yeah.
That means, according to statistics, there are 44 million alcoholics in the United States. That means if they affect 5 or 6 other people, there are over 250 million people in this country impacted by the disease of alcoholism. And so many of them don't know what to do or where to go. And that's another reason why I wrote this book.
Yeah.
How I Became My Father a Drunk. And if they read it, and I sure hope they will, they'll find that there is a way out.
You bet. WilliamBorchert.com is the web address. Follow the links here at take12radio.com. You can also go to amazon.com and order the book as well. I encourage you listeners to get a copy of this. You're going to want to pass this on to somebody after you read it, I guarantee you. We're going to be right back. We'll take a break. We'll be right back. More with my guest, William Borchert, author, screenwriter, and good friend in recovery. Don't go away.
Men, women, and their families experience tremendous pain and suffering due to the struggles they face from substance abuse and its co-occurring mental health challenges. They need to find a safe place for peace and healing. Therapia Addiction Healing Center was born out of a deep desire to provide that safe and powerful healing environment. Therapia exists to help people recover from addictions by developing and maintaining healthy, meaningful relationships with God, self, and others. To speak with an addiction specialist, call 1-855-652-4325. That's 1-855-652-4325. Or visit our website at www.therapia.net. Therapia Addiction Healing Center, restoring lives one step at a time.
All right, welcome back to the show. So glad that you've joined us today. Remember, our email address is take12radio@comcast.net. William Borchert is my guest this week. An inspiring and courageous new book probes the intimate details of a family devastated by the disease of alcohol addiction and then blessed by recovery. How about that? William Borchert is my guest. While focusing on the belligerent, often hateful relationship between a father and his son, stirred by abusive drinking that affects the entire family. The true story also highlights their startling and miraculous coming together through recovery. I want you to hear this soundbite. This is from When Love Is Not Enough, the Lois Wilson story. You talk about a relationship between two people of tremendous love and commitment. Here is Winona Ryder talking with her, played by Barry Pepper, her husband Bill W., in this scene from the television show. Listen to this.
You've been with me all these years, and you have no idea what I've been through. You're my husband, and I can't depend on you at all. I have prayed and I have fought for you like no one else. Why wasn't my love enough to make you stop?
Wow. That question has been asked by thousands of spouses, true?
Millions.
Yeah, millions.
Millions all over the world. Why? That question was constantly asked of me. Why? Why do you do it? Why? Is it something I did? I mean, is it why? And there's no answer. I mean, except the fact that an alcoholic is suffering from a disease that he's powerless over.
Yeah.
Until he finds the power through God to do something about it. And when I say through God, through the God-given program of 12 steps to recovery, that's the key. That's the key. And Momentota, I had how should I put it? A lot of painful memories when I wrote that scene, because it was like just taking the words out of my wife's mouth as I stood there, helpless in front of her, and this was, by the way, after Bill got sober.
Right. Right.
And he wanted to go off and save the world.
Yeah. And
wasn't paying any attention to someone who also needed to be saved, a wife that he claimed he loved, And so that's what happened.
Yeah. So
then Bill wised up and he came to realize he owed not only other people amends, but he owed his wife tremendous amends, and he made up for a lot. So,
did you ever experience? This is something that happened with my wife. People would come to her. This was after I was, had done my first formal working of the steps. I was in service. I was, all that stuff that goes with it. And they would tell her, man, Monty's such a great guy, and he does this for everybody and that for everybody. And she'd get mad because she's like, you don't know him like I know him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yep.
Oh my goodness.
One of the things I was told early on in sobriety was that I needed to bring what I learned in the rooms at the 12-step program and bring that home.
Yeah.
One of the first things that really kept me coming was something we call unconditional love. I was touched by unconditional love. Every person in that group, the Woodhaven group, I could tell just wanted to help me in the worst way. Were willing to go to any length to help me, and that kind of love I needed to bring home because I had never shown that kind of love in my home before.
Sure.
And when I began to try to show that kind of love, things began to change.
Yeah.
And it was really wonderful. By the way, I want to just say, while this is on my mind, that the book that I wrote, How I Became My Father, a Drunk, is not a downer.
No.
I mean, sure, it's a tough story, but it has what I call a happy ending. I mean, and all through it, there are funny and nutty anecdotes and interesting historical moments. Because it covers 50 years, and so I wanted to make it uplifting, not just I'll make it inspirational and uplifting, not just down. We have to go through the pain to get to the recovery, but and then the recovery is just wonderful. So it's not a downer. It's what I think. I try to write a love story.
Yes, and it definitely is. Let me quote Andrew Borchert, president of the National Council on Alcoholism and Drug Dependence. He says Bill Borchert's dramatic and heart-wrenching new book describes the often crazy, unpredictable, and tragic lives of those growing up with an actively alcoholic parent, how the children are impacted, and how some may unwittingly follow the same path. Happily, and I underline happily, in this case, Bill also shares the joy of recovery for himself, his dad, and their families. Yes, so you're right, because so many times we'll read stories or we'll even hear stories. We get all the pain, we get all the mess. And we don't hear the wonderful outcome as a result of applying and implementing the principles in these steps.
Right.
And you've covered that very well. This book is very well balanced. It just doesn't leave you with a horror story.
Good. I'm glad it came across that way.
Yeah.
And I'd like to just suggest to everyone anyone who's listening who's in recovery to make sure they talk about the good things that are happening to them in recovery, as well as the bad things that happened to them when they were sick. I think it's very important, particularly for newcomers in the 12-step program, to understand that there's a great life beyond once they get sober. But we we need people who have recovered, have recovered. I believe we recover.
I do too.
We're not continuing in recovery. We recover.
We recover.
We need to share the fact that we've got our family back, and we're back in church. We've got a new job. It's not bragging. It's sharing the good things that happen. Because if we're constantly going to share the bad stuff, that's going to discourage everybody. I mean, I didn't come into a Telstra program to live in the past.
Yeah.
I want to live in the present with a great future, and when you talk about your great future, I want that. And I know if my sponsor said to me one day, I'll never forget it. He said, if you stay sober, things will get better whether you want them to or not.
They just do. They just do. So let me ask you this. Okay, you've been around the block a few times. I mean, come on. And here's the deal. We have been watching for some time now different shifts in different directions depending on the weather, sometimes just depending on the day, going on within the fellowship, within the different 12-step fellowships. And sometimes the shifts seem to be very positive, and sometimes it feels like we're getting further away from what Bill, Bob, and Alcoholic Number 3 and the rest of them were even talking about. Do you have a concern for where the fellowship is today?
Yes and no, Monty. Yes and no.
Okay.
This has happened over the years. I mean, don't forget, when AA was in its relative infancy, when it was like 8, 9, 10 years old, there were fellowship groups around the country that were setting up their own rules and regulations, and they were supporting political campaigns.
Yeah.
They were having fundraising, meetings, gatherings, and serving beer to non-alcoholics, while the other alcoholics had their tongues out,
Yeah.
They were doing crazy stuff, which is why Bill and Dr. Bob, wrote the 12 Traditions to pull the 12-step program back together.
Right.
And so it's always being, alcoholics are, can be strange people at times, and don't forget, every alcoholic, I don't know about you, but every alcoholic I ever met has got an ego that can hardly fit through the door.
Sure.
Their pants may be stained and wet from, going into them, being in them, but yet their head is so big they think that they're God Almighty,
Yeah.
And even sometimes when they get sober, they don't lose that big ego, and they think they know more, than Bill Wilson and Dr. Bob. And particularly what I call so-called intellectuals, or people who think they're intellectual, that they think that sometimes the 12-step program is outdated and needs to be brought up to the times, and that maybe anonymity is outdated and all this other kind of garbage,
Yeah, yeah.
But, they'll come and they'll go. And sometimes there'll be a real threat, and sometimes they won't be. So, I've been around, as you know, I've been sober now 53 years.
Yeah, congratulations, by the way.
Thanks. So I've seen a lot, but because of the strength of the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, it survives all that stuff.
It works itself out. Do you see? I guess the thing that concerns me, and then we'll move on from this. But I think one of the things that concerns me is at least in my area out here in Oregon, I see a lot of people becoming meeting dependent, instead of God dependent. And it concerns me because when they can't get to a meeting, they're in deep weeds, and it seems to be something that's taught a lot. Go to 90 meetings in 90 days. Don't drink in between meetings. And if you're an alcoholic, like I'm an alcoholic, we're asking people to do something that's impossible without God in their life.
That can be a danger, and that's why sponsors need to make sure that the people that they sponsor know that the reason they come to 12-step meetings is so they can live out in the world, not just within the rooms.
Yeah.
We don't come in to crawl into a cocoon,
right?
And to stay safe. We need to live our sobriety opens up the door to life. And so while I still make 3 or 4 meetings a week, and if I got a brand new guy I'm sponsoring, I'll make a few more. But it's important to attend meetings because that's our medicine. But to do it, you need to make 7 meetings a week, and you need to do this, you need to do that. Give us a break. We need to, My sponsor used to say, you wear this program like a comfortable fitting suit. Not like you're in a lady's girdle and with a noose around your neck. That's nuts.
Yeah. And my listeners probably get tired of me saying this, but I like to quote Chris S., who says, the treatment for alcoholism, it's like if you have cancer and you're sitting around in the waiting room talking to other cancer patients about their cancer, that's not the treatment for cancer. You got to go into the doctor and sit down and do what he tells you to do. That's the treatment. So the treatment for alcoholism isn't sitting around in a meeting talking about your alcoholism. It's what's in these steps. It's this book. It's the directions that you follow. And sometimes we get away from that. So you're right. We need sponsors. We need people to make the approach. I mean, they used to make the approach, and so many times they think we're not doing that enough. We're waiting for the person to come to us. And I don't know about you, but today when I go to a meeting, I think my job is to listen to where I can be of maximum service to God and my fellows.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Not just to talk, but to I know it's tried. It sounds like it's just trivial, but it's very meaningful when we talk about. We don't talk the talk, we walk the walk.
Right.
Because if we don't put these 12 steps in our life, what's the sense of going to a meeting? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Nuts.
Yeah. The book is How I Became My Father, a Drunk by William G. Borchert. The website is williamborchert.com. You can follow the links here. Bill, tell the story about Petey the Duck.
Yeah. First of all, I just want to repeat like you did earlier.
Yeah.
You spell Borchert, capital B for boy, Orchert.
Right.
You pronounce it like an orchard with a B in front of it, but it's Borchert, William.
And may I just say, Bill, that I'm very proud of myself because the first time we met over the phone, we've met in person too at the core conference, I think. But the first time we met over the phone, I actually pronounced your name correctly, and you congratulated me.
That's right. I shook your hand very strongly.
Yes.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Tell us about Petey the Duck.
Yeah, well, it's Alsatian. That's why it's tough. And my grandmother was known as Boucher, and my grandfather was known as Borchert, But once they landed in Ellis Island, it became Borchert.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Borchert, William G. And that's my website, as you said, williamborchert.com. And when they just click on books and movies, and they'll find all of my movies and all of my books there.
Yeah.
And particularly my new one. And but anyway, yeah, Petey the Duck. My neighbor gave me. It was Easter time, and he had 4 ducks that were born, little chickies, and gave me one, and I raised them, and he got pretty big after a year or so, and I called him Petey. And he used to eat corn out of my hand, and it was just great, My father really wasn't around that much but my mother was, let me have the dog, and in the cold, rainy days, we put him down in the basement, in a little room in the basement, and I'd go down and feed him and pet him and whatnot. Spring and summer and fall, man, I had him out in the yard all the time, and my friends would come over, and so he was my best friend. He really was, particularly in those times when, if we have a drunken father in the house and a screaming mother, we hide in our bedrooms and hide with Petey, and just to get away from all of that fear and stuff. Now we had to move, right? And my parents said there's no room in our new place because it's much smaller, because my father wasn't doing well. Naturally, when you drink, you don't do well. And so there wasn't going to be any room for Petey. And my father promised that he had a friend out in Long Island, New York, who had a farm and a pond and a lot of ducks in the pond, and that he would take care of Petey, and I can go visit Petey once in a while. And I was 6 years old, I think, 6, 7 years old. And so I knew I had to give in, and so I did, but I wanted to believe him, although my father really told me the truth,
Yeah.
about these kind of things. And then one Sunday afternoon, we're sitting down for dinner. And out of the oven comes this, my mother said it was a large chicken. And my sister and I knew it wasn't a large chicken. It was Petey. Oh my God almighty. Can you imagine my reaction? Oh, God. And, of course, they went there. They ate Petey, not me. I got screamed and hollered. My father threatened me that it wasn't Petey. My mother promised it was. And my mother said to him, I said, tell him it's not Petey. And my Marilyn said, but it is Petey.
Oh, Bill.
Oh, my God. So that was a horror story.
That, and when I read that, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry or I mean.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I'm sitting here today. I'm laughing, but I'm also crying.
Sure.
Because it was a terrible thing to do. But they needed something to eat, and then Petey wasn't going to come, and my father did not have a friend on Long Island who had a pond on his farm. He didn't have.
Yeah.
So, but that's the way it was growing up in an alcoholic household. What do you do?
Yeah, you bet. You and I have something that is remarkably in common. I mean, obviously, being people that have recovered from alcoholism, we have a lot of things in common. But one of the stories, and I just had to crack up, and it's not a funny story. But when I was in middle school or junior high school, I think it was seventh grade. So it was sixth grade. So I was just out of elementary school. Mm-hmm. My dad was city manager in a town called Petaluma, California. And my parents went on some sort of city dinner thing. And I had a babysitter. We lived up against a hill. And it was summertime. And I decided that I was going to go out in the back and play with matches. And I lit the hill on fire, and I mean it was on fire.
Wow.
And I mean the police chief came. They had fire hoses going through our living room. My parents got called, and so tell us a story about the fire, Bill.
Again, it's not a very laughable story.
No.
I haven't set my house on fire in a long time, Monty.
Yeah.
Again, I was a kid. My father, it was a few weeks before Christmas, and my father had repainted the whole kitchen for my mother.
Yeah.
To get out of the doghouse, So, but he left the brushes in a can of turpentine in the hallway. We were up on the second floor above a grocery store, and I don't know why. I just don't know why. And maybe it was the smell or whatever it was, the aroma. But I took a match, and I waved it over this can filled with turpentine, and all of a sudden, boom! The thing just blew up, and the curtain on the door caught fire, And so I ran into the kitchen. I got a glass of water, and I threw the water onto the turpentine, and it splattered all over, and more fire came out. So my father was sleeping one off in the bedroom, and I went in screaming, hollering, and waking him up. And he came running out in his underwear, and he kicked the turpentine can down the steps, which set all the steps on fire.
Oh no!
But then he calls the fire department and whatnot, and he's trying to throw water on it. And for some reason or other, the fire department arrived pretty quickly, and it was a mess. It was really a mess. Part of the stairs were broken and burned out, and the whole kitchen was blackened and whatnot. And the end of the story is, as you mentioned, you were questioned by the police and stuff. But the fire marshal shows up to find out what started the fire.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether my father was trying to protect me because he felt guilty about all the stuff he had done to me. I don't know why, but he tried to convince the fire marshal that it was a short circuit, electrical short circuit in the hall. And the fire marshal says, "No, can't be, but why don't we ask your son?" And I'm sitting there crapping in my pants, and he says, the fire marshal just looks down at me and he says, "Son, do you know how this fire started?" And I broke out crying. And he said to my father, "That's how it started right there."
Oh, I love that story.
Oh, God.
Oh, my
So I
word.
tell stories like that. I also told this story. And now, the only reason I told this other story, among many that I tell in the book, was because my father turned out to be a hero for me. This is a story where I was practicing for a play, a Christmas pageant, they called it. And I was in the second grade, I think, And the nuns, the sister who was practicing us, wouldn't let me go to the bathroom. And I must have eaten something for lunch because I had diarrhea.
Oh, no.
And so I ran off the stage, and fortunately I had knickers, and and that's where it stopped, in my knickers,
Oh, gosh.
And I ran all the way to my grandmother's house, and she threw me into the tub, and she's washing me down. And by the way, I was practicing. I was going to be one of there were like elves, and there were shepherds,
Yeah.
and there were brownies. There were brownies in this thing. They're like elves. You dance around,
Uh-huh.
And so my grandmother's washing me down, and her neighbor comes by because he was a nice guy, and he used to shop for her. He wanted to find out if she needed anything from the store, and he sees that she's washing me down in the tub, and he says, "What happened to him?" And my grandmother says, he was practicing to be a brownie. Says, I think he got the part. But then my father went up to the nun and said, "How dare you not let my son go to the bathroom?" And blah, blah, blah. So he became my hero for standing up for me in that one instance.
Yeah. Well, folks, I want to tell you that these and other stories, this wonderful book, a story of tragedy and also reconciliation and recovery. You really need to get this, if for no other reason, to read it and pass this on, because I will tell you, there is a lie out there, and the lie is that alcoholics and drug addicts and people who are very sick can't get well because they're just too stupid. And I am telling you right now, that is a bunch of BS. We do get well, we do recover, and we do pass this thing on, and thousands of people recover from this. True?
Millions of people.
Millions of
all
people.
over the world, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I got to tell you, this is proof in the pudding right here. How I became my father a drunk, William G. Borchert. William, we're out of time. It went really fast, and I love it when you come on the show. Thank you so much. Is there anything you'd like to share in closing?
No, I just want to wish everybody a Happy New Year, and if anybody is out there with a hangover, please just pick up the phone and call for help, and you'll find a wonderful new life at the other end of the telephone.
Yeah,
I know I did, and so I wish you all the very, very best, and thank you for watching my movies and reading my books, and I'll keep on keeping on. Thank you.
You bet. And so my last question for you is, what is in the mill cooking next for Bill Borchert?
Well, I'm working on another book. Just started outlining it. I'm doing it with a doctor, and it's going to be focused on marijuana because marijuana is a gateway drug, and
good for you.
And people around this country think it's not, and they're doing stupid things like legalizing it.
Yeah,
and it's just going to eat our young people alive. So. This doctor asked me to work with him on it, and that's what I think we're going to be doing next.
Well, I'm excited, and you've got to get a hold of me when that thing, even before you launch it, so we can do a show to help launch that, because this is a really big pet peeve with me. I cannot believe how many meeting attenders, I say meeting attenders, that does not mean they're in recovery. How many 12-step meeting attenders are for the legalization of marijuana? It just drives me crazy. I'm like, do you really think that you can let the devil out of the box and expect him to behave?
Right, yeah. It's insane.
Yeah, so I am so glad to hear that. So please stay in touch with me and keep me abreast of that, would you?
I will, Monty. I will.
Very, very good. Very good. All right, my friends. William Borchert has been my guest this week. What an honor to have him on. The website is williamborchert.com. That's Borchert. Go to just click on the link on our website. Remember, you can follow us on iTunes and Amazon. On Podomatic, and there's all sorts of ways to listen to the show. Please feel free to download this show. You can burn it to a copy on a CD if you'd like to share it with folks in your home group. Feel free to do that. Lots of people do that. And we're just happy to get this stuff in your hands. It doesn't cost a penny to do that, so feel free to please do that. Our email address is take12radio@comcast.net. Comments on the shows, let us know what you think. If you have any suggestions for shows, if you've got a story to tell, there's a link on our website that says Be on the Show. Click on that, fill out the form, and someone will get in touch with you. Thank you so much, Bill. Again, God bless you, brother.
God bless you too, Monty, and thanks a million. I appreciate it.
You betcha. All right, until our next broadcast, this is the Monty'man, along with my guest, William Borchert, and we're wishing God's perfect serenity for you. Bye-bye now.
This has been a broadcast of KHLT Recovery Broadcasting.
Kitty, 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 kitty.